That's awesome. We'll get started in a second. I'll just announce our last one, which is next week, and I want to share the so this was a request that a few people made to have a conversation. So this will be next week, so a week from today, our last teaching talk, just to talk about like this idea of what is it going to be like when we go back. So we're going back in fall. We're kind of phasing in over the summer. Questions that people have about are students vaccinated, questions about ventilation, questions about teaching, questions about work, will it be hybrid? Will our DE classes change as a result of students taking in-person classes again? So a lot of conversations. So that'll be next week. And if you want to contribute, I'll send this out with my update at the end of this week. There's a Jamboard I put in the chat, and it just has 3 areas: challenges, opportunities, and needed resources that we might need. So that is next week. And speaking of resources, today we're excited to have Kellie Greiner, who's our head of the DRC, talking about the new, I had a chance to look at it, it's really slick and a ton of information, the Disability Center Resource Guide. And I'm particularly excited about this because I feel like we can include this in all the Canvas shells. We can have faculty really know policies and procedures. And there have been so many things as we've gone virtual with captioning and access and accessibility that I feel like it's one weird benefit of COVID-19 is that we were forced to go online. And one of the first things we said was, you have to make sure that you're following all the legal accessibility guidelines that are out there. So this is so timely to have Kellie with us today, because I think that this is like the moment where we kind of plunged into teaching DE, most of us, and one of the first things we had to do was make sure that accessibility was there. And as many of you know, Zoom and Canvas and YouTube, a lot of the technologies we use have improved over time. So the captioning, I think, has become much better than when we started with the pandemic. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Kellie, and I'll stop my share so you could start yours. And it's all yours. And thanks for coming today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm excited. I think that the COVID-19 move to online work has really given us an opportunity to step back and reevaluate why we do a lot of things and the things that we do. And so this project was kind of part of that for the DRC, really looking at the services that we provide, the services that other colleges are providing, and see if there's places that we can make adjustments, things like that, make improvements. All right. Go ahead and share, optimize, screen 2. All right. Present. All right, how does that look?
Looks good.
Good, okay. If at any point you guys have questions or there's something you want to share, there's a whole section we're going to go over every accommodation. So if there's an experience you've had in your classroom or something that you're thinking might happen in the future that you want to talk about, go ahead and just stop me, let me know. We can dive deeper into that. I'm ready to answer questions today. So for anyone who's tuning in later, I'm Kellie Greiner. I'm the director of the Disability Resource Center. Today I'm going to be talking about the Disability Resource Center Faculty and Staff Support Guide. It's really an A to Z list of the disability services that will orient you to our program. All right, and to get a copy of the guide, you can go ahead and click this link, and I also will drop it in the chat. There we go. So it's a PDF copy of the guide. Yeah. All right. And in the first section of the guide, you're going to find the introduction. This is going to be the orientation to our services. You're going to find all of the contact information for our office. You're also going to find our philosophy and mission statement. I'm going to go ahead and read the mission statement. The mission of the DRC is to promote self-confidence in an educational environment while fostering student independence. The staff of the DRC is committed to the establishment of a positive learning environment, focusing on academic integrity, sensitivity to our students, creating a springboard for change, and ultimately the achievement of student success. At the DRC, our students come first, and their individual needs are the focal point of attaining these goals. In the DRC, we believe that all students have the potential for growth and success. All students have the right to be treated with respect. We believe the diversity brought to the campus by students with disabilities enriches the overall college learning environment. And we believe that there's mutual responsibility in the educational process. All right, and there is also listed the board policies related to the Disability Resource Center. One thing I do want to draw your attention to is that the DRC is not responsible for service animals on campus because service animals are not an academic accommodation. If there's an issue with the service animal, the DRC, myself, and will work with our HR department, Shelly, to ensure that the rights of our students and the policies of the district are both being respected. All right, you'll also find information on person first language, the syllabus statement, and the rights and responsibilities. So the first section is going to be person first language. This is when we're talking about how to build empathy through person first language. Person first language emphasizes the individuality, equality, and dignity of people with disabilities. The best method to use when using person first language or trying to utilize person first language is to always put the person first. To use person first language, you want to focus on individuality. So this means referring to students by their preferences and asking them their preferences. Most people prefer to be referred to by their names. Some people have birth names, some people have preferred names. The best method is to use the question, how do you identify yourself? There are some outliers where people prefer to be identified by their disability rather than the use of person first language. So instead of saying a person who is deaf, most people who are involved in the deaf community, rather than just labeled as a person with hearing loss, are fine with being referred to as a deaf person with a capital D. This is a notation of cultural identity that is related to disability. Some people still prefer to be referred to as autistic rather than a person with autism or on the autism spectrum. And some people still prefer to be referred to as handicapped. It's best to really just ask a person and let them choose. If somebody chooses an identification, it's important not to correct them. So you don't say, oh no, we don't say handicapped anymore. You're a person with a disability. If that's how they want to be referred to, then we want to respect that. All right, the next thing you want to pay attention to is equality. We want to make sure that we're providing the same access and experience to all of our students, regardless of their disability. And then when we're using person first language, we're really focusing on dignity and empowerment. We want to make sure that we're not defining our students by their barriers, that we're using solution-focused, strength-based approaches to learning when we're talking about our students. All right, so when you're referring a student for disability services, what do you do? How do you do it? The first time this may happen to you is when a student self-discloses to you they're a student with a disability. So if a student says to you, I have a disability, we want to make sure that you have the resources to then turn around and say, well, we have a disability resource center. Here's how you can get in contact with them. And here's how it can help you in your class that you're taking. Sometimes students don't self-disclose their disability to their instructor, and that is their right to confidentiality. if you see a student that is like overall struggling, if they're reporting to you that like they just don't get it, or the reading is taking them such a long time that they can't get all their other work done, those kinds of flags, you may want to refer the student for a learning disability assessment. We do provide learning disability assessments in our office. Learning disability assessments are available to students that do not have other documented disabilities. So if a student has another documented disability, like they have anxiety or they have depression and they have their documentation, we don't give them a learning disability assessment because we can serve them based on their previous documentation.
Kelly, can I ask a quick question on that? Because so I know there's like confidentiality with HIPAA. So when you say a student, if they were diagnosed with anxiety, that can they show that to you? I'm assuming the faculty member wouldn't see that, right? Or could we see it, or does it have to go through your office? Like if they had a anxiety disorder that was identified.
Yeah, typically that's going to be up to the student to decide how much they disclose to their faculty
Okay.
member. So when, as the DRC, what we disclose to the faculty is the student has a disability and these are the services you can provide. The student may feel more comfortable giving you more information about their disability, but they're in no way required to.
Okay.
But for the most part, this is something that we suss out in our office. So if you have a student that's having a problem, send them our way without getting into the nitty gritty, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty with them.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Um, yeah, and then as far as maintaining confidentiality, our students are entitled to their confidentiality regarding their accommodations, regarding their disability, and also regarding their academic experience, you know, their grades, how they're doing in their classes. So we want to make sure that we're really respecting this and that we're offering our students opportunities to talk to us in confidential spaces, that we're inviting them into our offices, that we're giving them links to Zoom meetings or bringing cafe spaces where they can talk to us alone and confidentially. And then it's important that you understand the process. Students are more likely to follow through if we're all on the same page on campus, if all of our staff know how the process works and what the student is going through, we're more likely to be able to support and retain that student. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show a clip on this next slide. This is really the A to Z walkthrough of what the student experiences when they're applying for services. So our full application process is done online through our website. When we're back on campus in the fall, we do have several iPads and computers that students can use in our office to fill out the application rather than giving them a piece of paper to fill out. And then the best part about filling out the application online is that it's at everybody's fingertips all the time. Anyone can apply for our services, whether it be in the middle of the night when they're up doing homework or in the morning before they have to go to class. So this is a copy of our application survey. We're asking students general intake information as well as disability related information here. Some of these forms can be difficult for students to fill out. Some of them that have been really well supported through their parents in high school, or students with memory issues sometimes won't remember all of the information. And so Nicole, our DRC technician, will fill this out with people as well if they need that. So this is what we see a lot of in our office is students that are unable to keep up with the workload or finish assessments in time. Some of them may be due to learning fluency, like it seems like it is with this person. Other people, it could be due to test anxiety, maybe a combination of the two. And also academic trauma. A lot of our students have experienced trauma around testing or their educational experience that really impacts them when they're taking exams. Now here we have a list of services that you've used in the past. Some students will select all of the services. Some students will select the services that they're provided on their IEP plan. But then they'll select the services that they want from the DRC. And usually the amount of services that they select is less than what we can provide, because when they sit down with me, I'm able to kind of figure out what we can get to best help them, and it's often more times than what they thought. All of our students are required to provide disability-related documentation, rather than just dropping that piece of paper off at the office, which they can still do if they need to. They can upload their documentation or have their professional upload it for them on our website. When we say professional verification, we're looking for documentation from a medical provider or a psychiatrist, a counselor, licensed marriage family therapist. We do support students with addiction, and so we also accept letters from group therapy addiction related programs. Now for alternate media requests, these are audio textbooks. So every student that wants an audio textbook needs to request it. They don't necessarily need to have purchased the textbook outright, but they do need to have some kind of copy of the book. So we have the library lending program. They can apply for a book through there, or they can buy the textbook online or rent the textbook online. The last form that we're looking at is the academic accommodation instructor notification. So this is what our students are filling out every quarter. Because of the FERPA guidelines, they're adults with disabilities and they're responsible for their disability related documentation. So we need a request every quarter to let their new instructors know of their accommodations. We never speak with an instructor about a student's accommodations unless we have this form complete. And the most important part of this form, in my opinion, is that little section right there that encourages students to advocate for themselves by speaking with their instructors. It's not required for our students because of confidentiality that they speak to their instructors about their disability, but it is required that they participate in the interactive process and speak with their instructors about their accommodations if they need to.
Kellie,
all right, so that was
just a quick question. So, and I put in the chat, it's great to see all those forms. Those are on the website. Is this something, as far as we may talk about it later, but should we have these links in our Canvas shells? Is that the type of thing that students will understand? Will they already get information from you or say from the Promise program or a counselor about this before they take our class? Or should we have that as like a FYI in our Canvas shell, maybe as a module page or something?
So yes and no, kind of. I think it's really important for faculty to know how to go about this process. So if the student says, well, I don't know where to get that, you know where to get that. But
Okay.
I don't think that you need to put this specific information in your Canvas shell or in your syllabus statement. I do have some other information for your syllabus statement that will link your students to the new student page of the website, which is really where all this information lives.
Okay.
Or link your students to My Cranium Cafe, and I'll talk them through the process and provide them all the links.
Okay, that's great. That's really good to know. Thank you.
All right. All right, and there we go. So now we're going to talk about the syllabus statement. So it's a really important opportunity for faculty to normalize disability, normalize accommodations, and build an inclusive campus environment by talking about the Disability Resource Center and the services that we want to provide in their syllabus statement. So when a student reads the disability statement in the syllabus statement, they're thinking to themselves, wow, my instructor gets me, supports me, and wants me to be successful before they even meet you. This is a great opportunity to make your students feel welcome and feel like you're interested in their success before the class even starts. So in your syllabus statement, you want to be sure to include 4 things. The first thing that you want to be sure to include are resources. So resource in this case is the Disability Resource Center. And so if you look in the faculty guide on page 9, we have all of our current information listed. That's going to have our room location for when we're back on campus, our office phone number, our Google Voice number that we're using now, our link to Cranium Cafe, and the link to the website. All right, the next thing that you want to include is an invitation for your students to talk to you in a confidential space, to let them know that if they have questions about their accommodations, they should speak to you during your office hours or during a designated time before or after class. The next thing is a request for timeliness. So we're going to talk a lot about timeliness today because it really is at the heart of what we do in the quarter system, right? If we only have 10 weeks to pack it all in, we want to make sure the services are offered up front. You're going to be encouraging your students to talk to our office the first day of school or the first week of classes. We do make this request for timeliness, but students are not required to file for accommodations at any point throughout the quarter. At whatever point we get a request for them, we process that request and we ask the faculty member to implement those accommodations. We don't do retroactive accommodations. So if the midterm was last week and the student applies for disability services today, they don't get to retake the midterm with more time. The last thing that you want to put in your syllabus statement is a recommendation that your student reach out to you if they're having a hard time or if they're not getting their accommodations. A lot of students, when they don't, sometimes faculty forget to upload or change the time in Canvas so they get their extended time. Sometimes when students see that, they get really nervous and they freak out and they email me. But really, when you're about to take your test, I'm not the best person to talk to. Your instructor is the best person to talk to. So you want to make sure that you're laying the groundwork so that your students feel comfortable coming to you with those kinds of things. All right, so how are you going to know if a student receives disability services? Other than the student telling you themselves, and really just student self-report should not be enough, you always want to be looking for this accommodation notification from our office. Accommodation notification is always going to come to your LTCC email address as an email titled Academic Accommodation Notification with the listed quarter and the course ID. Inside this email, what you're going to see is a short message. Hey, you've got a student with a registered disability requesting services. If you need help implementing the services, contact me. A PDF copy of the accommodation form. So this is going to be the actual services that it's your responsibility to provide. And any follow-up requests. Some students have unique situations. So if there is a unique situation, I tend to write that in this accommodation notification email. All right, we're going to talk about the disability-related rights and responsibilities for our staff, student, our faculty, and our college. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our students, because it's always students first. Students have the right to fully participate in all of our programs. They also have the right to voluntarily participate in the Disability Resource Center. So if a student has a disability, they're welcome to participate in our services, but they are by no means required to. Students have the right to appeal, and students have the right to confidentiality. Faculty have the right to set and post academic standards for all students. Faculty have the right to evaluate all students based on standards of the class and grade accordingly. And faculty have the right to academic freedom. The Disability Resource Center has the right to request documentation. We request documentation from every one of our students that receive services. The Disability Resource Center has the right to deny a request. So sometimes we have students request services from us. We don't always grant those requests. And if we don't grant the request, they do have the right to appeal. And then, and the DRC also has the right to suspend services. So when students get disability services, they complete an application with student responsibilities. Our students are required to follow the code of conduct. There is no disability that waives you from your requirement to follow the code of conduct. And students that misuse disability services will be notified once written formally, and then after that, their services may be suspended. The college has the right to request documentation, and the college has the right to require students to follow the student code of conduct. All right, disability-related responsibilities. So our students have responsibilities when it comes to their services. Their first responsibility is that they provide documentation to our office. We don't always require our students to provide documentation right the day before they meet with me. Sometimes we provide temporary documentation for students. I'm sure everybody on this planet knows that working with medical offices is not always super easy. You know, sometimes you fax your form in and you just don't get it back. And so we really work with students on those kinds of things. We also work with students that don't have documented disabilities yet, but are really struggling. So we refer students to counseling, we refer students to county mental health, we refer students to Barton. We can help our students get documentation as well. The second responsibility of the students is that they be timely. So we do not approve requests for extended test time at 9 a.m. the morning of the test that starts at 10 a.m. It's important that students do things trying for 2 weeks in advance. Because we're a small office, usually we can turn things around faster than that, but we're not required to. It's the student's responsibility that they work collaboratively. So this is not a one-stop shop appointment. This is a process that the student should be engaging in to get the most out of their services. We can give you all the tools in the world, but if you're not willing to interact with those tools and interact with your faculty and staff members, they're not going to be helpful. Lastly, the students are required to follow the student code of conduct. Faculty's responsibilities include providing accessible materials. This does include captioning, like Scott talked about. We'll talk later about 508 laws. That is the college's responsibility and each individual faculty's responsibility as employees of the college to be producing well-captioned materials. It's the responsibility of faculty members to utilize our office for support. So if you don't know how to do something, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with raising your hand and admitting that you don't know how to do it. I'll come around and help you. It's also important that faculty be timely, that you be looking out for those emails from my office. If I requested that you send out that you implement accommodations in April and the student's telling you at the end of May that they didn't get their extended test time, there's going to be issues in that process. It's the faculty's responsibility to respect confidentiality, to remember that a lot of students are sensitive to disability and to being singled out. We really want to make sure that we're respecting their experience and giving them the same experience that other students get. It's our responsibility as the DRC to serve and advocate for students. At first, that was the only thing I had there, and then I realized it is also our responsibility to be timely. The college has the responsibility to post and provide information. The college has the responsibility to ensure access, establish policies, and foster an inclusive learning environment. All right, now we're gonna go through the full lowdown. So it's important that you understand the accommodations that a student is receiving, because in disability services, we are about proving the interactive process. It's important that you show that you've engaged with the accommodations and that you've engaged the student. All right, so I'm gonna go through each accommodation and read from the guidebook about each accommodation. And if there's one that you want to talk about, how you could implement it in your class, if you've seen it before, if you've had problems with it, whatever it may be, let me know. All right, so the first thing that we're talking about is accessible furniture and preferential seating. The DRC provides accessible furniture such as ergonomic chairs and adjustable tables for students. These furniture items are marked and reserved. Accessible furniture is placed and moved around campus by the maintenance department. Sometimes other students who prefer this furniture will assume that it's for anyone. It's your responsibility to ensure that the student requesting the accommodation receives seating in the specified furniture. So if you're in the classroom and a chair has a little sign on it that says Property of Disability Resource Center, you want to make sure that the student that's receiving an accessible furniture accommodation is the one sitting in that chair. Politely asking somebody to just move to another seat would be fine. The seat is assigned, please move. Preferential seating is something that we provide to students who may need to leave the classroom for some reason. Students who are low vision need to sit up front every time but don't want to fight for their seat. They want to know that they have an assigned seat. Some students will need an assigned seat for lab situations. If somebody needs to be able to get to the bathroom more quickly and doesn't want to maneuver around many lab tables, we might want them seated by the door. Okay. We don't currently offer advising for students in the Disability Resource Center. They can just see any of the counselors on campus. But Beth will actually be doing our counseling beginning in the fall. So students will be able to go through their whole disability service application process and get registered for their classes. All right. Alternate media materials. This is generally audio textbooks. Textbooks in alternate formats such as audio, enlarged print, and Braille can be obtained through the DRC. It is required that students purchase or rent a copy of the textbook before they are provided the alternate media materials. Textbook requests can be requested for free through the LTCC Quarterly Learning Library program. Students may request handouts and worksheets in alternate formats as well. If a student requests a handout or worksheet in an alternate format, you'll provide it to the Disability Resource Center. So if you have a student that is low vision and you're handing out worksheets in class, they might want those worksheets blown up to a larger font. We'll ask you for them at the beginning of the quarter and we'll reproduce them for the student. All right. Assistive technology and software. So this is going to be our different computer programs that we have to help our students. We have screen reading, we have CCTVs for people that are low vision. We have a video phone in our office for students that are deaf to make phone calls on. And we're using speech to text software through Google. So if a student wants to use speech to text software, they can use that software on quizzes and tests as well. If there's a writing component, like you write several paragraphs during a test, they might want to use this service. But we only provide it to students that are already comfortable using speech to text or are willing to practice and show that they're comfortable using speech to text. Because we don't want to just say, oh, you can use this computer program on your test, and then you get to the midterm and you've never used it before and it's not working for you. All right, digital recording and smart pens. We do allow some of our students to record their classes. I would say that this is my #1 thing that changed because of COVID that I think is awesome, is that almost everything is being recorded and posted later for our students. I strongly recommend that all of our DRC students go back and listen to their classes or go back and watch their classes. I think that extra time spent with the material is really helpful. And then we have smart pens that students can check out in our office as well. Flexible assignment deadlines. This is something that we've added that we haven't done in the past. I get this request from students a lot, mostly because at the high school in the IEP, they're very flexible with the assignment deadlines. And then we come to college and we're like, you gotta turn everything in on time. It can be a really difficult transition for some students. Some students have episodic disabilities and they don't know when those things are going to impact them. They could be experiencing migraines for like a week straight. We don't want to expect that person to stare at the computer for like 2 days to write a paper. So as it says here, this is a highly individualized accommodation. The student is required, we only do this accommodation before or at the beginning of a quarter, and the student is required to meet with their faculty member, review the syllabus, talk about each assignment, give a reason for why they wouldn't be able to turn that assignment in on time, and then submit a copy of the syllabus with the agreed upon flexible assignment deadlines. So that really is all in the power of the faculty member. I don't look at the assignments and say, well, I think it should be okay if you turn this one in a week late. It really is an opportunity for the faculty member and the student to work together. All right, liaison to faculty and staff, that is me. I am your faculty and staff liaison. And what that means is that I notify the faculty and the staff of the students' accommodations. So some students, it's really stressful for them to try and keep up with their accommodations. And they will want me to be available to help their faculty members. So we don't expect our students to remind faculty of their extended test time, things like that. And faculty support, so it's really important. It's if you see an accommodation on there that you don't understand or you don't think fits into your class, it's important that you ask me how you can best provide that accommodation. It's also really an opportunity for creative thinking in everyone's classes. How can you best provide these materials to these students? All right, note-taking support. We have 2 different kinds of note-taking support that a student can choose from. Some of them may choose both. This is something that the student should be communicating with the faculty member. It's always nice if the faculty member sends the student an email saying, you know, I got your academic accommodation request. What kind of note-taking support would you like? Peer note-taking or instructor outlines? So peer note-taking is going to be the good old-fashioned peer note-taker in the class, another person who takes notes for you and provides them to you after class as a copy in an email or something. We do have a procedure in here for requesting a peer note taker because we want to make sure that even though we're asking somebody else from the class, that we're maintaining that student's privacy. So we're not announcing to the whole class who needs this accommodation. Rather, we're selecting a note taker and then notifying that one person that they should be emailing their notes to whoever it may be. Let's see, is there anything? Oh, and a peer note taker will receive priority registration and also a letter of recommendation from our office for taking notes for a student. For instructor outlines, this is something that we haven't done in the past, but I think it's really important for students with mental health conditions such as anxiety. A lot of students spend time being anxious about what's going to happen in class. So in an instructor outline, you'll tell them at the beginning of class, we're going to turn in our homework. We're going to do a 30-minute lecture, a 20-minute small group discussion on whatever chapter, and a 10-minute wrap-up quiz. Providing a student with this information up front can be really helpful to allowing them to be more present in your classroom. They already know what's going to happen today. They have maybe even prepared for what's going to happen today so that they can really interact in the classroom environment. All right, personal attendant. This is unique individualized support, generally for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. This is a person who is not hired by the college, but is contracted through an outside program like the regional center to support the student with all kinds of things, but not limited to assisting with physical safety and injury avoidance, monitoring medical conditions, assisting with personal hygiene, assisting with the adjustment of clothing and other personal items, providing cues to support impulse and behavioral control, assisting with eating and drinking, assisting with personal possessions, providing guidance along paths of travel, and assisting with navigation of the campus. So those are the different kinds of things that a personal attendant is hired to do. They're not hired to interact in the classroom. They're not hired to answer questions for the student. They're there to prompt and support the students so that they can get the most out of the classroom experience. They're also not there to take the class. It's just important to remember that this person is not hired by the college. They're hired by an outside agency that works with the college. So we're not responsible for training the personal attendant, but we are responsible with vetting the personal attendant through whatever program they work through. So we don't just let any person walk into the classroom and act as a personal attendant. You'll get a special notification of this service as well. All right, priority registration. The one thing that I think is important about priority registration that I always tell our students is that they need to select each specific class that they're going to take with each specific instructor when they're meeting with their counselor. So when they get their ed plans, it says this quarter you're going to take course ID 1, 2, 3, 4. But we want the student to go back to the counseling department and say, okay, well, I function best in the morning. So will you look at the not the catalog, what is the other one called? The schedule with me and pick out the exact class. Yeah, because I know someone just told us that the other day. Very different catalog schedule. But so that means that if a student functions best in the morning when they wake up, they've had their 1 cup of coffee, they're ready to get to class, we want to make sure that person gets those 9 a.m. morning classes that they prefer. Some students have better experiences with certain faculty they work really well with. We want to make sure that they're able to get into those faculty members' classes. So that's why we give priority registration. Public speaking and planned participation. I'm going to go ahead and read this one straight from the manual. Students may require the option of verbally participating during class, and flexibility should be provided for class participation and presentation requirements involving oral communication when it does not fundamentally alter the learning outcomes of the course. Advance notice for participation informs students of required participation in classroom group work and presentations in instances when spontaneous participation could be difficult. Faculty should work with the student to coordinate oral presentations during faculty office hours if an in-class presentation is required to accomplish the student learning outcomes. The faculty member should work with the student to practice or record oral presentations to be shown during the class period. So a lot of our students struggle with public speaking. I think a lot of students in general, and even just human beings, struggle with public speaking, but it can cause our students a lot of trauma and a lot of anxiety, and it can really take away from their opportunities to be present in the classroom and to experience their classes fully. So when a student is getting a planned speaking or planned participation accommodation, you want to ask yourself, okay, what part of public speaking is required to demonstrate the student learning outcomes? And then you want to speak with the student about what they can do during your office hours, what they can do pre-recorded, and really how you can best mediate their anxieties during class through planned participation. So saying, if you have a student that struggles with being called on, like every once in a while, I get a student that tells me that they were nervous about being called on the entire time during class for 2 hours straight. Their stomach hurt and they were sweaty palms and they just couldn't focus, and it breaks my heart. And so really telling those students, you know, I'm going to call on you to talk about chapter 2 in the first 10 minutes of class, or I'm going to call on you during this section of group work, or you're going to be expected to lead a group discussion in class today. Those kinds of things are really going to help these students. And then again, just like flexible assignments, that's something that like you and the student need to sit down and agree upon together. That's not just something that like you get the form from me and you eliminate all of the course requirements. You want to make sure that you're interacting with the student and making a plan that works best for what is required for your class, but also for them. All right. A scribe is generally provided for a proctored test. We're talking about a real person writing for a student. This person is hired by the DRC and the Tutoring Learning Center to do actual writing, and we're talking word for word. And then we extend the extended test time for scribes because we want to make sure that a student is getting all the time they need and some more to go over whatever they're working on with the scribe. All right. Sign language interpreters and live captioning are provided and coordinated by the DRC. So if you have a student who is big D deaf and using American Sign Language, we will hire a professional sign language interpreter for your class. This person will come to every class. They will come to counseling appointments. They will come to I don't know what else, tutoring sessions. They'll come to events on campus. Generally, the interpreters that we use are Carla and Ryan Johnston. Carla works at the college, so that might be someone that you guys are familiar with seeing. But we want to make sure that when we're using an interpreter, even if we know who they are, we're using them as a tool to talk directly to the student. So when we're using an interpreter, we want to make sure that we're using them like a robot is insensitive, but kind of like a machine. You want to speak through the interpreter to the student. You don't want to say, hey, could you please tell David this? You just say, David, whatever you need to tell David, the student. Taking out, and the interpreter will interpret that too. If you say, can you please tell so-and-so, it's insensitive to speak to our students through utilizing a sign language interpreter in that way. We want to make sure that we're making eye contact with them and that we're speaking directly to them. And live captioning. So this is going to be something that a student specifically requests, and we will hire captionists for your classes. This is separate than just like turning on your Zoom captions. We all know that there could be problems with those kinds of captions. Maybe they're not super accurate. Maybe the spelling is off. So if a student requests it, we will hire a real person to come into your classroom or come into your Zoom room and do the captioning. Tutoring is offered on a super individual basis, especially right now. In the past, when we had like a group floating tutor available in the DRC, it hasn't been really taken advantage of by students. So if you have a student that needs tutoring that they can't get through Cranium Cafe or through the library, definitely let me know. Use of personal device in class. So this is going to be outside of your syllabus statement preventing students from using technology in class. So if you say you don't want students using their personal laptops or their cell phones during class, I understand these things can be distracting for a lot of students, but our students often use them for taking pictures of the board, recording, and digital note taking. All right, the testing services. These are the ones that you will see most often. These are the most abundant services that we provide. The adjustment of exam length. So we do provide our students with extended time for assignments. And for some students, they need tests taken over multiple days or periods. We understand that faculty may not be okay with a student seeing a whole test and then going home and coming back the next day. So we'll split it up into chunks for them and give them the first page one day, the second page the next day. That's for students that need a really long time. I would say that most of our students are using just like a double test time, maybe 2 or 3 hours. All right, allowance of breaks. We want to make sure that a 15-minute break is being built into assessments over 2 hours long. So some final exams are like 3 hours for a regular class. This does mean that we give the student 6 hours, but that's crazy as far as like brain fatigue and ability to perform for that long. So we want to make sure that every 2 hours somebody's coming in or somebody is building into the Zoom session or into the Canvas page a 15-minute break for the student to go to the bathroom, to eat food, to walk around, drink water, whatever that may be. We do not provide them access to their cell phones if they're taking a proctored test on campus during these breaks. And proctoring on campus in the fall, will be done in a classroom. It will not be done in the library. It will still be coordinated by the library. Some students require a basic function calculator. We do not, well, we have scientific calculators for students, but that is not an academic accommodation. All right, and then one of the unique services that we're providing now, as we see more unique students with different challenges, are a memory aid. So a memory aid for tests is not an answer, but it's something that prompts or jogs a student's memory. Some students have a hard time when they're studying really crystallizing that information because of their short-term memory. And especially in a 10-week quarter, you know, we're getting through information so quickly and we're not going over it very many times. And so a memory aid is going to be another one of these opportunities to work really closely with the student. It's important that you sit down and build a memory aid with a student. Their memory aids can only be used if they're approved by the instructor. Let's see. And typically a memory aid is going to be a piece of paper or a note card of a certain size, if you decide, that has symbols, cues, mnemonic devices, or formulas on it. I do have a memory aid video, but I think that I'm going to skip it unless you guys, it has samples, so unless you're really curious.
We can share it with this video too, since I have the link there. It'll be fine to share it later. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that. That's good. Cut it close here. All right, and then let's see. All right, so there's a couple more sections in the guide. The next section is the disability categories defined and limitations. We're not going to talk about that today, but if you're curious about what your student may be experiencing, in here we have a definition of each of the different disability categories that we serve and a list of their educational limitations. These are going to be the barriers that they would typically face in the educational system. All right. And then we have a section on the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's very long and you can go in and read it yourself, but I'm going to cover the short things that I think that you need to know. What you need to know about the ADA is that it is 1990 a legislation that protects people from disability discrimination. It protects people of all ages who have physical or mental disabilities that substantially limit a major life activity. And education is a major life activity, ability to participate in our services. The ADA applies in a few different sectors. So services that are open to the public, this is going to be restaurants or shopping malls or Target, whatever. Schools, so like Lake Tahoe Community College, and workplaces with more than 15 employees. Oftentimes, workplaces with less than 15 employees that are not able to provide an accommodation are claiming that that accommodation causes them undue hardship. This is typically financial hardship because some services can be really expensive to provide or really time intensive. So they don't expect every mom and pop shop on the planet to be able to provide ADA accommodations. And when we're talking about the ADA, we're talking about reasonable accommodations. We're talking about accommodations are not required if they cause an undue burden or a fundamental alteration. So that's mostly what a faculty member should be concerned with, is fundamental alteration. Does this service take away from the student learning outcomes of my course? There's also a section here in the guide about the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Specifically, our services are listed under the 504, but we're going to talk today about section 508. This is a section on technology accessibility. Really, the takeaway that we need to have from this is that captions are the responsibility of each individual faculty member and that we cannot put out any more uncaptioned materials. We need to pay attention to automated captions that are made by computers. We need to make sure that we're providing the correct spellings of names, any personal pronouns, places, that we're providing the correct grammar, punctuation, capitalization, periods. These kinds of things are important to make sure that our students are really provided equal access to the materials. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about in this last procedural section are the two procedures that are available. The first is the administrative procedure for determining if an accommodation is an undue burden. So this means, does it put undue burden on the college or the district? Is there a service that we are unable to provide because of our size or because we're in a rural area? Those kinds of things. The second is something that faculty should probably be paying more attention to, is the process for determining if an accommodation is a fundamental alteration. So as a faculty member, you do not have the right to deny any accommodation, but you can claim that an accommodation is a fundamental alteration to your course that would prevent the student from completing a college requirement, achieving the student learning outcomes, or that would be detrimental to the experience of other students. Really, to begin that process, what you do is contact the Disability Resource Center, the Vice President of Academic Affairs, and or the Dean of Instruction. So go ahead and send an email to myself, Michelle, and Allie. All right, and lastly, don't be afraid to ask me questions. I am here to help. I am here to support faculty. If there's something that you need help implementing, I can log into your Canvas classes and I can work in there with you. I can come to your classes on campus and observe the scenario. Really, I'm here to help. And I'm also on Cranium Cafe. So there are frequently asked questions as well in the handbook if there's anything that you're curious about. And if you have any questions regarding the handbook or you see any typos, please let me know. And now I can take questions if anybody has any more questions.
So Kelly, this was really incredible. I'm so excited about sharing this with faculty because it so neatly lays out every single accommodation. I love it. So one question is, a lot of our faculty work with our ISP, and those refer to our incarcerated student program students. So the question is, do you do accommodations with them, or does that happen through California Department of Corrections? How does that work with ISP?
Well, so it really depends on what the student needs. So I would say that generally the student would make some kind of request, or the department would make some kind of request to Shane probably, and then he would let me know. But the problem that we have with implementing accommodations there is that a lot of the classes are correspondence work.
Right.
And we can't give you all of the materials and also give you extra time. Like, it's just kind of built in there. So I've yet to, I know Bob has given a couple like print accommodations in the past. He's reproduced materials. Okay. I've yet to have anybody ask me for anything. So yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for letting me know on that. Go ahead, Solange.
Kelly, I have a question regarding Canvas. Now, if I have quizzes that have a 15-minute window and the students get 15 minutes, if I have a student that says, I can't do this quiz in 15 minutes, and I open it up to a half hour or 45 minutes or even an hour, that opens it up to every student. Is there a way to just make the one student's test last longer?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I have some step-by-step instructions, or Scott, maybe if you want to show her.
Yeah, I can. Let me just pull one up, and it's pretty easy to do. I just have to log in first. Make sure.
Yeah, because
you can do it by student. I've done it in the past. So
it's like a 2-button process. I know that. Not hard.
So it is possible to take one student and extend their time.
Yes.
Instead of the whole class. Good, because I I don't want the whole class to have 45 minutes to take the test.
Now I'll have to see here, and I can in post-production blur this, but I'm just looking for, um, let's see here. Actually, I can't do that class. I'm trying to find one from the past where I can show you. So it might take me a second. If you have another question, go ahead and ask it. Otherwise, I'm trying to find just an old course, and I'll have to see if it'll let me do it since the class has ended.
Right.
Let me see here. Let me just find one.
So Kelly, is it required that the student bring in a documentation from DRC to be accommodated, or can they accommodate themselves without your support?
They can accommodate themselves without my support. Yeah, I mean, well, kind of. That sounds complicated when I say it, but it's not complicated. If a student is going to ask you for accommodations, you should say, have you worked with the Disability Resource Center? I haven't got an accommodation notification. If they want to just do their, like, I had a student who is deaf and their class was on Zoom. And so they were calling in using a call-in interpreting service through Zoom. So I never even knew about it. I didn't have to hire an interpreter for them. They did all of that on their own. They can do that. If a student wants extended test time, that has to go through our office. You have the right as a faculty member to also make exceptions for students if you'd like to. I prefer that faculty also go through our office rather than just like, well, okay, this time I'll give it to you, because it just opens us up for legal sticky icky stuff.
Right. So basically, with a student, go through the DRC for either their request or my request.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
If they need something that they can't do on their own, then they should definitely be coming through our office. But I mean, students do small coping skills related things to accommodate themselves all the time. That like,
okay.
Nothing to do.
So I did find, I don't have it in a live class, but I put it in the chat, Solange, and if you just Google extended time Canvas, a bunch of these guides come up. This is from University of Colorado Boulder, but it's the exact process we use. So when you go to the assignment tab, you have the option to assign a specific availability or time extension to everyone in the class or groups of students. And so this shows you on the quizzes here, you would edit it, and then this is very familiar. This is where you would and typically click on moderate quiz, and then you can give these special extensions. So you can do it, it's really in two places, under the moderate and then also the assignment tab. And I've done it in the past. It works really well. And again, as long as you know, and it's good that you get those like bolded subject lines from the DRC, because that way it's hard to lose those. And you can always search by accommodation in your email as well in case anything goes to spam. But this would be the process, so it's pretty straightforward. Yeah.
Very good. I see it and I understand that.
Yeah.
Very good.
And then, I wanted to say something also about captioning that I saw last night. I think it's the new Google phone. It was a really cool commercial, and it was a deaf individual who said, for the first time, I spoke to my son on the phone, and I guess it's built in, and it pops up like all in black with white lettering, and it just looked really cool. And I thought that could be a game changer, because I know I use speech to text all the time, like sometimes if I'm trying to dictate, and it's gotten really good. And then second, I wanted to say that the good news about captioning is all the services out there that we use, whether it's a Canvas caption, Canvas Studio, or YouTube, you can always go in and edit, and I'd be happy to do a workshop on that. It's super easy to edit, and for me, Kelly hit all those, acronyms, capitalization, spelling. And then I noticed certain programs I use, like if I use the word context, I sometimes have to say context because it'll change it to content. And so I think what you'll find is that it's not as time consuming as you would think to go in and edit a captioning file, because it tends to be the same stuff. There's certain words in our disciplines that we use, or names, proper names, or names of companies or software. And if every time it misses that, it's really easy to go in and catch all those. So I think it's great how the captioning files are available to us and we can go in and edit it, particularly if it's a class lecture that you're going to use time and again in a future quarter. It really makes sense to do that captioning correction. I think you could do, depending on the length of the class, but it could take you half an hour or so to go in and correct, because most of the programs do a good job, but it's the punctuation, the acronyms, the capitalizations, and some of those jargony words that I think that the programs have a tough time with. So it's kind of good news, I think, for captioning.
Yes, one of my first jobs in college was captioning materials, and I would just sit there with my headphones in on the computer and type, go back, type, go back, type, go back. They have made it, the AI is just so much better than it used to be.
It's amazing.
There's classes where I'm only finding issues with like proper pronouns, personal pronouns.
Yep.
And if you have a whole class of materials that isn't captioned, and like that is preventing you from becoming CBC OEI accredited, or you're ready to put those materials out there, but the captioning is preventing you from doing that, we do have the DECT grant funding. And I mean, really, it just through College of the Canyons, we send your captioning off to another, it's called AI Media. The captionists there caption it, and then College of the Canyons grant program pays for it. It's really just a lot of paperwork, but I do all the paperwork, so all you have to do is ask.
That's great. Yeah, well, I really appreciate this overview, and again, I think it's going to be great really going to push this out for faculty to watch it, because having those slides with all the accommodations just makes it so much easier to know what's available. And so I just really appreciate just the level of detail, and as you said, I guess you're always open door policy. So if people have questions, just either come by in the fall, or I guess do a virtual visit on Cranium Cafe. So
yes, absolutely. And just a reminder that our services are closed for the summer. We still help students that need emergency support, but at the end of your classes, let's be encouraging our students to register for next year before the end of the year.
Yeah. I'm sure there'll be, for all of us, a good deal of transition in the fall to kind of figure things out, like what will be in person, what will be hybrid, what will be fully virtual. So it'll be a challenge, I think, for sure, for all of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you so
really
much for participating.
Oh, this is great. This is great. You're awesome. You are awesome.
Thank you. If you ever have any questions, just let me know.
Yeah, your work is amazing.